Greetings, guitar engineers. I'm Desi Cerna, and in this free guitar lesson, I'm going to talk about the different ways that guitar players hold their guitars and position their hands. Whether you're a beginner just getting started with the basics or you're a veteran who's been playing for years, you want to make sure that you avoid injury and position yourself as comfortably as possible so that you can play as best as possible. All right, let's dive in. First off, in the world of classical guitar, it's taught that you should actually rest the guitar on your left leg, assuming you're a right-handed player. Now, to do this, I am raising my foot off the floor using one of these footrests like this. This is considered to be an ideal position for playing classical guitar, and it makes your left hand fingerings more comfortable, and it also makes it more comfortable for your right hand to fingerpick the strings. Now, this is all well and good if you're playing classical guitar, but in the world of pop, rock, and blues, you see guitar players hold the guitar differently and use different hand positions. Now, I'm assuming that, like me, you're interested in playing pop, rock, and blues. So let's talk about how you would typically hold the guitar and position your hand for those styles. All right, so I've switched to my electric guitar here. So typically, you would see guitar players rest the guitar on their right leg, again, assuming that you are right-handed. And in this case, you could still elevate your foot if you wanted to. You might need to do that depending on what type of chair you're sitting on. Sometimes if I'm sitting on a chair or a stool that has some legs or something that I can rest my foot on, I take advantage of that. But elevating this leg a little bit is good, and that can just help you hold the guitar more securely. Now, this is a position that you typically would see guitar players use. This is the position that I would most typically use. I'm drawn to it because it's just most comfortable for me. But there are some disadvantages to it, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. So when you play guitar, there's different types of things that you would do, like you might strum some open chords. You might play some bar chords. You might play some pentatonic patterns or some pentatonic boxes, as they're called. Or you might play some major scale patterns, and in particular, you might play the 3-note per string variety where you have to stretch your fingers horizontally. And all of these things are going to kind of stress your hand a little bit differently, so you might position yourself a little bit differently to make yourself more comfortable. So let's talk about that and what that means to your left hand, and in particular what that means to your thumb. So there are kind of 3 basic positions that you would put your thumb in when you're playing. You're either going to have your thumb on the back of the neck, kind of right here in the middle, or some players would actually wrap their thumb around the neck some amount like this. Or you're going to be somewhere in between. Maybe you're kind of resting on this portion of the neck right here, and it's just a little bit visible on the other side of the fretboard. And you'll see that guitar players will move their thumb back and forth depending on what they're playing. And so the correct thumb position to use is the one that supports your fingers with whatever they happen to be playing. Now, when I'm playing something like open chords, basic open chords, I'm usually most comfortable with my thumb kind of being up here on the top, on this side of the fretboard, and I might even actually wrap it in some cases. So I usually don't put it down in the middle of the fretboard. I'm just not comfortable with that. I don't like the distance I have here between my palm and the neck, and I'm reaching too much with my fingers. So I want to bring this part of my palm up like this, and then I can curl my fingers and come down on the strings with some less reaching. Now I have kind of large hands and long fingers, so my thumb really doesn't have doesn't have anywhere to go, so it's kind of has to come up here a little bit. But I'm not actually wrapping it. But this is pretty comfortable. Now in some cases, I will wrap it. So for example, if I go to a D chord, sometimes I wrap it so I can bump into the E string and mute it. Or I might even fret a note on the 6th string, like maybe if I'm playing a D/F sharp. And so my thumb is just kind of moving a little bit here, and it's positioned here because this is most comfortable for me. And perhaps if I were studying with a classical guitar instructor, he might slap my thumb with a ruler and tell me, no, 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 you shouldn't bring it up that far. It shouldn't be visible. But this is uncomfortable for me in my hands. And I've got too much, I'm flexing my wrist too much here, and that's uncomfortable. So when I bring it up like this, you can see my wrist straightens out. I eliminate this space here. This is actually better technique, and this is typically what I see in other guitar players too. So when you're in this position, this is the best position for your thumb typically. Now, let's say I'm going to move around the fretboard though and play some bar chords. Going to notice that suddenly the thumb has disappeared. When I play bar chords, I bring it down here to the middle of the back of the neck, or maybe just maybe not all the way to the middle of the back of the neck, but I bring it down enough so that it's no longer visible on that side of the fretboard. And I need to do that in order to play bar chords where I have to straighten a finger out and cover all of the strings. This is definitely a more comfortable position, and it's just necessary in order for me to get my fingers positioning correctly for those bar chords. Now, if I'm going to play the wraparound bar chords where you kind of break this shape up and you do a partial version of it, and then you play the root on the sixth string with your thumb. This is kind of like Hendrix style. This is something that you would do kind of when you want to move beyond the basics. So I don't recommend this for beginners. But this is a good fingering to learn. It's very useful in a lot of styles of music. And when I do that, then my thumb comes around the neck, obviously because I have to fret on the sixth string. But also if I'm just playing a partial chord shape like this and I'm not barring like that, I'm more comfortable bringing this part of my hand up to the neck and bringing my thumb up here or even wrapping it. So having the thumb up here is correct for me when I'm playing this much of the chord. But if I want to play the whole thing, the thumb's going to come down. Maybe if I'm just even playing a power chord, I might keep that thumb down there as well. It really all depends on what I'm most comfortable with. So let's talk about playing some pentatonic. If I'm doing like little pentatonic boxes where I'm mainly just playing in using the portion of the patterns where I don't have to reach any farther than just 2 frets, this sort of stuff. So I'm kind of always in a little 2-fret box position. I will usually have my thumb wrapped around the neck. I'm just more comfortable that way. And you will see that of other players as well. That's pretty typical. I like this hand position, and I will use it as much as possible because my wrist is relaxed here. When I bring that thumb down to the back of the neck, my wrist ends up having to do this, which is necessary sometimes, like if I'm doing bar chords. But I don't like this feeling. This is uncomfortable, and this kind of puts added strain on my hand. So if I don't have to do this, I won't. I will move my hand to this position, which is much more comfortable. So, right? Like that. Now, if I'm playing like major scale patterns, sometimes I have to stretch my fingers horizontally, particularly if I'm doing like 3-note per string major scale patterns like this. And in order to do that, I have to bring my thumb back back behind the neck. If I have my thumb over here, I just physically cannot separate my fingers and to reach those notes. My hands just don't work that way. So whenever I need to spread my fingers horizontally, I've got to bring that thumb to the back of the neck, see what's happening with the wrist here, and that's when I can spread those fingers. Or maybe if I'm doing a rhythm like this. I just couldn't do that without bringing my thumb to the back of the neck. So in that case, the correct thumb position is the back of the neck. Makes it more uncomfortable for my wrist here, but it makes it possible for me to spread my fingers like that. Let me switch keys here. So here's another example if I'm doing something like this song by the Police. This requires a lot of stretching. So notice that you do not see my thumb because it's supporting my hand there in the back of the neck. And I just realized that, let me see. Look where it is. It's actually past the center. That's where I needed to put it in order to get my fingers to stretch right. So I've come past the center of the neck, like right here. Now that doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. You just have to figure out where the best thumb position is until those fingers will, stretch. Okay? Now, hey, if you're still in the beginning stages or you're still learning basic songs, you should not even be messing with chords like this. This is for people that are way beyond the basics, maybe intermediate level players and up. This is kind of advanced stuff here, but I just want to talk about it just so you understand how the position of your thumb is going to change depending on what you're doing with your fingers. So there really isn't a, quote, correct place for your thumb. It's going to change. So let's stay in the key of A, but let's go to like a blues thing, with some bends. Right? All right, so I'm kind of riffing and jamming here in the A minor pentatonic, and I was bending some notes and stuff. So when I start bending notes, you're going to notice that my thumb's going to come up around the neck, just like you see with Stevie, Vaughan, and Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, and those types of players. Because I really have more power when I grab that neck like this. So that thumb is going to come around because that makes it possible for me to do those bends. I just have more strength and power. I have more control over the strings. You know that when you bend strings, you also have to control unwanted noise from the idle strings. And so wrapping your thumb is one way that you can prevent those other strings from ringing. And then, of course, in blues styles of music like I was playing there, you actually can use the thumb to fret notes. Right? Stevie Ray Vaughan did that sort of thing all the time. But you may have noticed that I played a run where I did something like, in which case I came down the scale, my fourth finger got involved, and at this point my thumb is dropping to the back of the neck so that I can stretch my fingers apart, instead of, that's a little uncomfortable for me. But by the time I get to here, my thumb comes back. Or if I'm doing something like, that's a very popular blues technique used by many famous players. And when I do that, I'm more comfortable with my thumb being up here and then kind of having this grip like that on the neck and kind of pivoting, whoops, as opposed to being in this position. That's just doesn't feel right to me, and I really can't get the same flow with that technique. By the way, this technique, takes a while to accomplish and get used to. I used to watch a video of Stevie Vaughan doing it over and over. I would just try to mimic his hand movement, and it just took time. And as I played, I started to become more and more comfortable with it. But anyway, as you can see, whether you're playing open chords or bar chords, whether you're playing in some pentatonic boxes or you're stretching your fingers horizontally, your thumb is going to move from the back of the neck up to the top of the neck in order to support your fingers with what they're doing. So that's the reason why there isn't a one correct way to place your thumb on the neck. You have to move it around in order to support these techniques, and that's also why taking the classical approach isn't going to help you if you're playing, you know, rock and blues and that sort of thing, because there are techniques involved with popular styles of music that you just don't do in classical. So now with that said, sometimes the classical position is useful even if you are not playing classical music. You will oftentimes see pop and rock players resting their guitars on the left leg. And if you haven't tried this, I recommend that you try it. You know, if we go back to something like that song by the Police that I was playing a moment ago where I had to stretch my fingers horizontally. So this is actually easier in this position than it is when I was in this position here. When I'm in this position here, look at how much I have to flex my wrist. That's uncomfortable. My hand's kind of, you know, my elbow's tight to my body here in order to get my fingers in place. But when I move over to this leg right here, my elbow doesn't have to be so tight into my body. I don't have to flex my wrist as much, so it takes some of that pressure off, particularly this fingering, which is just a real stretch if you've ever tried it. And in fact, if you go to Google Images and search Andy Summers, guitarist for the Police, you'll notice that he does a lot. You'll see him do a lot of chord fingerings where he stretches his fingers horizontally. And you'll notice that when you see pictures of him sitting down, he's resting his guitar on his left leg. And when you see pictures of him standing up, he has his guitar hanging in about the same position. I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you've never tried resting your guitar on your left leg, you certainly can, and it can help even when you're playing some rock and blues stuff. Now with that said, you still probably are going to want to wrap your thumb from time to time, you know, with certain things. If you're playing, you know, rock and blues, you kind of need to, because oftentimes the thumb is needed to fret certain, you know, notes. Think about that Hendrix-style rhythm where you're fretting notes and playing partial bar chord shapes, you know. So whether you're on the left leg or on the right leg, you're still, if you're playing, you know, more popular styles of music, something other than classical, there's still times when wrapping that thumb is either going to be necessary, or it may not be necessary, but it's likely to put your hand in a little bit more comfortable position, you know, for a bend or something like that, you know. Now, something I want to point out is that in most of my instructional videos, I hold my guitar on my right leg, and I keep the fretboard very horizontal like this. And I don't always recommend doing this. The reason why I do that is because I want to keep the guitar in the video frame like this, right? I don't want it to be out of the frame like that. So I want to keep it at this angle for you to you know, see what I'm doing on the fretboard. But this often means that I end up being uncomfortable, particularly if I'm playing like 3-note per string scale patterns, that sort of thing, or if I was, you know, teaching you how to play something like this, or even if I was just playing, you know, regular bar chords. As I am filming my lessons, I often have to take breaks because my hand gets tired, and in particular, I get discomfort in my wrist, because I'm holding the guitar in this position. So I don't recommend that you do that all the time. And I wouldn't normally do that when I'm playing. I only do it in the videos because I'm trying to keep the guitar in the straight and horizontal and in the frame for you. All right, so next I want to talk about using a guitar strap. I don't have quite enough room to stand here in my little studio. But anyway, when you use a guitar strap, you can oftentimes position your guitar similarly to if you were seated and you had the guitar resting on your left leg. So you can, instead of having the fretboard straight and horizontal, you can angle it up like this, get that headstock closer to your head, and this puts your hand in a real comfortable position. I should say, it puts your hand in a more comfortable position for bar chords and stretching your fingers horizontally. And it can still be comfortable for when you're wrapping your thumb and doing stuff like, Now you need to be careful. If you have your strap too low, the lower it goes, then the more you're putting your wrist in this position. You're having to come down below the neck and flex your wrist and reach up. That is extremely uncomfortable for me. So I am not one of those types of players that likes to wear the guitar real low. Now, in rock and roll, this is considered really, really cool. The lower the guitar is, it's kind of like wearing saggy pants, I guess. And depending on what type of player you are, if you're not doing anything fancy, you can get away with it. Or if you just happen to have a really flexible wrist and this doesn't bother you, then you can wear your guitar low and it's not a big deal. For me, this is actually very bothersome. I don't have a super flexible wrist, and this is not good for me. And also, I want to move around the fretboard and use a variety of techniques and everything. So this is just not an optimal position to be in. So I am going to raise my guitar strap to probably somewhere between this position, or sometimes I just kind of rest it around my belly here, and it all depends. So this would be kind of an acceptable, comfortable position for me. But let's say, for example, that I was playing in a Police tribute band, and so we're doing a bunch of songs by the Police, and I have to do all these Andy Summers stretch chord fingerings. Well, you know what? For that particular gig, I would probably raise my guitar strap up like this, just so I could get through the night more comfortably. If I were just doing a blues set, well, then I could probably lower it a little bit because I'm going to wrap my thumb anyway, and that's a very comfortable position there, and I can still bend the strings and do all my blues stuff. So you see that you just have to find the position that works best for you, and you need to consider using some different positions. You don't necessarily want to be married to the same position all the time, and perhaps if that's what's happened, you want to try adjusting your guitar strap, changing whether you rest the guitar on your right leg or your left leg to see how that better supports your left hand and your fretting hand. Now, one thing we didn't talk about is how the position of your guitar affects your picking hand or your strumming hand. So sometimes you need to take that into consideration too. Maybe there's something you're trying to pick, you're trying to strum, and you need to see if you would do it more comfortably if maybe you moved the guitar over to the other leg. Does that help your picking hand? Or are you putting your wrist in an awkward position when you rest it on your right hand? Or if you're standing with the strap and you have your hand lower, or if you have maybe your strap too high, the higher you would have your guitar, it's more difficult to come in here and do a palm muting technique where you lay your hand on the strings, which is done so often. So the higher you go, you might be putting your hands in a more awkward position. Not only your right hand, your left hand too in some cases. So you want to think about the right hand as well, and whenever you are learning something new, or whenever you are maybe experiencing some discomfort, try moving positions to see if it makes a difference. All right, so those are some things you can take into consideration as you play guitar. You want to make sure that you avoid discomfort, and you want to make sure that you make things as easy as possible to play. There is no one perfect way to hold your guitar or position your thumb. It's really about what works best in each particular situation. You can expect your thumb to go behind the neck at times, and for your thumb to come up to the top of the neck at times, and maybe even wrap around the fretboard at times. You may want to rest your guitar on your right leg at times and on your left leg at times. You might want to stand up and use a strap. You might want to lower your guitar for some things. You might want to raise it for other things. You will figure out the best way to position yourself when you play. It's something that you work out over time with lots of playing and lots of practice. So take these tips that I've given you into consideration, work with them over time, and see where they lead. But don't try to get this stuff all figured out now before you work on moving forward with your playing. Focus on practicing, building your song repertoire, and moving forward with your playing, and then allow these sort of things, holding your guitar, positioning your hands, to come together over time. And if you need help getting on a plan to move forward with your playing, go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, answer the questions I ask you about your playing, and I will send you free custom video instruction calibrated to your current level. I can put you on a plan for free to fill gaps in your playing and develop your skills so you can play your favorite songs and sound great. Go to guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the video description. Well, did you find this video helpful? If you did, you can click like and leave me some comments below. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on that little bell icon to receive alerts when new videos are uploaded. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.